If you're a high performer and your productivity is slipping, it usually doesn't look dramatic. You're still getting things done, you're still showing up, you're still making decisions, but everything feels harder. Simple choices take longer, complex decisions feel foggy, and your tolerance for friction drops. Your patience is also generally thinner than it used to be. Those things are not character flaws. That is decision fatigue, and it's quietly killing executive productivity. Here's the mistake that most people make. They think that decision fatigue is psychological. Too many choices, too much thinking, too much responsibility. So they try and optimize it with mindset tricks, better planners, complex morning routines. All of those things miss the point entirely. Decision fatigue is not about motivation. It's about capacity. Your brain does not get tired because it's weak. It gets tired because it's burning fuel faster than it can replenish it. That part of your brain that suffers first is the one you rely on most as a leader, the prefrontal cortex. This is the region that is responsible for things like judgment, impulse control, strategic thinking, prioritization, emotional regulation. When it's underfueled or overstressed, decision quality drops predictably. Here's the uncomfortable truth. High performers create more decision fatigue than anyone else because they operate under constant pressure. They hold long-term consequences in mind. They switch contexts all day, and they rarely get true cognitive recovery. Your brain never gets the chance to switch into idle mode, so it adapts. And adaptation, that looks like mental fog, slower processing, emotional reactivity, and defaulting to easier decisions. And it's all because your brain is protecting itself. This is where chronic stress becomes the spine of the problem, because stress isn't just emotional. It's a metabolic signal. When stress stays elevated, cortisol also stays elevated, and cortisol changes how the brain allocates energy. Under sustained stress, the body diverts resources away from high-level cognition and towards survival functions. This means you're going to have less glucose availability to the prefrontal cortex. You're going to have impaired dopamine signaling and reduced cognitive flexibility. You can still think, but you just think worse, I guess. This is why decision fatigue doesn't show up as stupidity. It shows up as shortcuts. You avoid complex decisions. You delay important ones. You snap at small inconveniences, and you lose tolerance for nuance. You become very efficient, but in the wrong way. And this isn't burnout yet. This is just the warning phase. Here's the part that most productivity experts get wrong. This is not fixed by making fewer decisions. Yes, reducing low value decisions helps the margins, but the real issue is that your decision engine is underpowered. You're asking a stressed, underfueled system to produce elite cognitive output, and that just never works long term. Let me put it in really simple terms. Your brain runs on energy, not motivation, not discipline, not grit. It runs on energy. Specifically, stable glucose delivery, intact dopamine signaling, and regulated stress hormones. When those systems wobble, decision quality is going to collapse, even in very smart people. Actually, it's especially in very smart people. And this is why decision fatigue often surprises high performers. You don't feel burned out. You just feel less sharp, less decisive, less patient, and you start questioning yourself a little bit. I've lived this, not in a dramatic collapse, nothing like that, but just the subtle erosion of clarity. I could still perform, but everything just requires so much more effort than it should have. And that's the danger zone because most people don't fix it there. They push through, like I did. Let's break down the subtle signs of decision fatigue most executives miss, how to spot it early, and also talk about why traditional productivity fixes fail completely. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And more importantly, you can start reversing it. Decision fatigue doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up as confusion or incompetence. It shows up as erosion. And that's why most high performers miss it, because the first sign is not poor decisions, it's delayed decisions. You don't know, or you know what needs to be done and you understand the variables, but you just keep pushing it to tomorrow. And not because you're avoiding responsibility, but because your brain is unconsciously conserving energy. Decision making is very expensive. When capacity drops, the brain postpones cost. The second sign is shortened tolerance. Little things irritate you much, much more than they should. Meetings feel longer, emails feel heavier, people feel slower. And this isn't impatience, it's the prefrontal cortex losing its ability to regulate emotional input. When energy availability drops, emotional filtering weakens. You don't become irrational, you just become less buffered. The third sign is default behavior. You stop weighing options and start choosing what's familiar. Not because it's better, but because it's easier. And this shows up in things like saying yes when you should say no, sticking with old strategies, avoiding innovation, and choosing speed over precision. The brain does this to reduce cognitive load. Again, it's not laziness, it's self-preservation. Another signal is mental narrowing. Your thinking becomes more linear, less creative, less flexible, less open to alternate viewpoints. You still reason well within known frameworks, but adaptive thinking drops. This is a classic stress adaptation. When the brain perceives sustained demand, it prioritizes efficiency over exploration. Great for survival, terrible for leadership. Here's a big one that most people misinterpret completely. You become productive, but less effective. You check boxes, you clear emails, you finish tasks, but strategic clarity fades. You stay busy without moving the needle. And this is one of the most dangerous phases because it looks very much like performance. So let's connect this to your physiology. Decision fatigue accelerates when three specific systems drift together. 1, stress hormones stay elevated. 2, energy delivery to the brain becomes unstable. And 3, dopamine signaling weakens. You don't feel exhausted in your body, you just feel exhausted in your judgment. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated. Elevated cortisol interferes with glucose delivery to the prefrontal cortex. It suppresses dopamine signaling and it shifts the brain toward threat-based processing. Threat-based processing means that you have more reactive decisions, less long-term thinking, and slightly reduced impulse control. This is not psychological weakness, it is predictable neurobiology. And here's why high performers are uniquely vulnerable to this. Your brain is trained to push. You have been rewarded for operating under pressure for years, and you aren't going to notice when high demand becomes chronic overload. You normalize the strain until decision quality starts slipping. Here's the critical distinction. Decision fatigue is not the same as burnout. Burnout is collapse. Decision fatigue is a capacity warning. If you catch it at decision fatigue, reversal is actually quite quick. If you ignore it, the system compensates by reducing output further. Most productivity advice fails here because it treats the symptom, not the system. Fewer meetings aren't going to fix it. Better planners won't fix it. Morning routines aren't going to fix it. Those are organizational tools. Decision fatigue is a biological limitation. And this is why people say, I'm still making it through the day, but I just feel like something's off. That's the signal. Your decision engine is running hot with insufficient recovery. So next, I'm going to show you how to immediately reduce decision fatigue, what actually restores cognitive capacity, and how to rebuild decision quality without grinding harder or outsourcing your thinking. And this isn't about doing less forever. That's not what we're talking about here. It's about restoring the systems that let you lead at a high level without bleeding clarity. Because once you understand that decision fatigue is a biological capacity problem, the solution becomes very, very clear. You don't fix it by trying harder. You fix it by restoring the systems that fuel judgment. And this is where most high performers finally get some relief. Okay, so step number 1, Reduce cognitive load before you add optimization. The fastest way to reduce decision fatigue is not better decision making. It is fewer high-cost decisions when your brain is least capable of making them. This means restructuring when you decide, not just what you decide. High-quality decisions require stable energy, emotional regulation, and cognitive flexibility. When those things are compromised, the same decision costs more. So the first fix is strategic. Try and move most of your complex decisions, negotiations, and high-stakes conversations to earlier in the day when your brain energy is at its highest. This alone improves cognitive quality without changing anything else. Step number 2, stabilize brain energy, not just focus. Decision fatigue accelerates when energy delivery to the brain becomes inconsistent. When glucose availability swings, the prefrontal cortex loses priority access. The result is fog, impulsivity, and mental narrowing. The fix is not more fuel. It's predictable fuel. Consistent meal timing, adequate protein, avoiding long gaps that force stress hormones to compensate. This stabilizes energy delivery and reduces the cognitive cost of each decision that you make. Not by boosting focus, but by lowering friction. Step number 3, interrupt the stress feedback loop. Chronic stress doesn't just drain energy. It changes how your brain interprets demand. So when stress remains elevated, the brain shifts toward threat-based processing. That means faster decisions, poor nuance, and less strategic patience. To reverse this, the nervous system has to experience downshifts. Not vacations, not long breaks, but short, intentional interruptions. A few simple examples of this would be walking without input, controlled breathing, and brief disengagement from screens. These aren't wellness habits. They are neural resets. They tell the brain that demand is not constant. That signal alone improves your decision bandwidth remarkably. Step number 4, stop forcing decisions when capacity is low. One of the most damaging habits high performers have is forcing clarity. You sit at your desk trying to think harder. You reread the same information. You push through resistance. This makes the problem worse. When capacity is low, forcing decisions increases stress and drains energy further. The smarter move is to pause decision-making when signals are bad, if possible, and not forever. Briefly, delay is not failure. Delay is often the highest quality decision when your physiology is compromised. Step number 5, rebuild capacity before you optimize performance. And here's where most people jump in too early. They want hacks, they want nootropics, supplements, productivity tools. Those things can help later. But first, capacity must be rebuilt. That means stabilizing energy, regulating stress, supporting metabolic health, and restoring recovery. When capacity returns, decision quality improves automatically. No tricks required. So, what does this look like in real life? When decision fatigue begins reversing, people notice things like clearer thinking earlier in the day, less emotional reactivity, improved tolerance for complexity, better impulse control, and faster recovery after mentally demanding days. Not because they fixed their mindset, but because their brain regained fuel and flexibility. So, why does this require a system and not willpower? This is another place that high performers tend to get stuck. They understand the problem. They even implement a few changes. But without a system, inconsistency creeps back in again. Stress rises again. Energy destabilizes. Decision fatigue returns. That's why decision quality cannot be treated in isolation. It's downstream of energy regulation, stress management, and metabolic stability. This is exactly what the 30-day Executive Energy Reset Blueprint is built for. It's designed to stabilize energy first, restore cognitive capacity, reduce decision fatigue, and rebuild sustainable output. And here's the key. Most people notice improvements in decision clarity before anything else, before fat loss, before strength gains, before motivation returns. And this is because the brain is always first in line when systems recover. If you want to stop bleeding clarity and start making high quality decisions again, the link's below. Subscribe to the channel for more physiology first breakdowns and share this with someone who's still trying to think their way out of a biological problem. Because decision fatigue isn't weakness, it's a signal. And once you know how to read that signal, you can reverse it. I'll see you all very soon. Take care.